Hello and welcome to this tutorial. I will be painting this waterfall cascading down these steps as has been voted for on Instagram, and all the canvas details will be down in the description. I'm going to be starting with the HB pencil from Procreate and my sketch on my first layer. To begin, I'm going to start carving out the shapes for the rocks, and I'll just sort of start circling the shapes in very vaguely and then refine them as I go on. I also keep this quite loose just to get an eye for the placement of things and proportions. So yeah, just adding some squares, and I imagine then this here will be sort of the first ledge where it goes down slightly, where the waterfall, the main waterfall, is happening here, basically. The two rocks at the bottom, and we'll have like a sort of stone tiley floor here, ground. When I add the ground like this, I just sort of, when they are tiles, try and make them more wide instead of well, god, I'm bad at this. Basically trying to get them really long and thin and sort of stretched. Diagonal lines in between, but don't worry about that. That's just like the first random ideas for this. I'll have a rock over here. Now I'm going to try and add some sides to the different rocks that I've added already, so that when I'm color blocking in a minute, I will know where to add what sort of shade. I usually try and, do this in a sort of square way, especially with this reference, but doesn't have to be square, it could be round. It's just a bit easier also to define the shape, the sides sometimes for me. So we've got a top, two sides on each here. Then over here I will have a larger boulder. This one is just like this one, with a top side and a side here. And then this larger one also has a top surface on which we'll have some nice greens growing and stuff, and then this here is sort of the other side. Then over here we've got a rock with a side facing the light side, and then going into the distance, we're going up in perspective out to the side. There will be a surface here, but maybe slightly visible, like here you can see there is some light hitting the surface, greens growing there, and then we've got some smaller ones up here with a couple of sides and edges. I'm just going to hatch or shade in this here because that will be shadow, really dark between these rocks. That's not a side that belongs to any particular one. And here, to be honest, I don't want to have another side that shows, because we're looking at it and the side would vanish into the distance, sort of. I'll also, just for the aesthetics, I will just make a smaller rock and this trio up here, and then zoom out again. We've got another one. Well, I've added another one here, to be honest. This isn't following the reference anymore. I'm going to add another one with a nice surface up here, one at here, surface and side. If you want to make it a bit clearer, I'm erasing with my studio pen, but my hard details brush, but the studio pen will do it just fine. Or you can erase with anything really. Alright, and just making these edges a little bit clearer. Adding a fun little scribble there. And have some side rocks here. This will all be dark behind the waterfall. And then we've got the waterfall surface here where some greens are hanging down. We've got a sort of bank here with lots of greens growing on it next to the waterfall top where it comes through. Like that. And then I'm gonna have my second ledge up here with lots of green hanging down. I'm going to put this rock a little bit back like that, and we'll have a bit more of a ledge here then. Greens, waterfall, dark, 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 dark beneath this rock because he's sitting on some rocks we can't see behind, which is nice, creating a bit of a cave down here. And then here we'll just add another surface, edge, and really dark edge. And yeah, then we've just got this over here. Quite fun shape, bit like a lantern. Couple of sides, with the bottom side as well, because it's sort of tilted. I know this is probably an AI generated reference, so, you know, I don't expect it to make a lot of sense in terms of actual physicality. But it's just having fun, practicing, doing something with Procreate. Alright, I think this is pretty fine. I'll add a little rock here in the back, like in the reference, and then shading here, and the direction of the waterfall stream will sort of change because I set it a little bit more to the side than the reference, like that. I've got two edges here, one belongs to something else, I guess, and then the cave, and yeah, alright. So we've got our very basic sketch. I love the sketching part of the whole thing, and then we'll put a new layer below the sketch. We'll turn the opacity of the layer really low. I mean, I've got it on 30%, that usually works just fine. And what I want to do now is fill out this shape. You can do it several ways. You could just grab a huge brush and start filling it in, or you can use the lasso tool, in which case I'll do that right now. So make sure it's on a new layer and then start with the freehand down here, just basically copying the outline of the whole shape that you want to draw or fill out in this case. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. As you can see, I'm just very loosely, very roughly following this shape that I've added. And then we can just choose any color because the stones are a bit more in the yellow region. I will be grabbing this color. I will put the color palette below as well for you guys, so you can use the same colors or similar colors if you want to. In fact, I might as well keep track as well, although this always takes a bit longer, but it'll be fine. We'll get there. So now that we've got our shape, you can just hide your sketch layer to see how it looks, but to be honest, until we've actually filled in some more light, it probably won't make too much difference. The sketch layer now I will set to multiply, and you know, increase the opacity a little bit by 6%, I think I did it. And then on a new layer above the base, I'll make that into a clipping mask layer now, and by doing that I now can add any color and can't go painting over the edge, which is lovely. Alright, so we're going to be choosing the syrup brush. I'll be using a mixture of Procreate and my own brushes, but this is a Procreate one, and I'll just say alternatives for the ones I use that are my own. So I want to be adding some light now, or the surfaces of the rocks, and to be honest, this is quite a nice color. It's quite bright, so there will be no mistaking this is a surface. And I will just add this to the surfaces that have the most light. Oh, and see, when you can see that you have in fact missed a little bit, just add that in with, you know, on the base layer. Oh, I think I moved it, didn't I? That's why it looks so funny. Oops, sorry guys. Let me just go back. Reset, there we go. Alright, let's do that again. We had this color. And now I'm gonna make a clipping layer mask, choose that lighter color and go back into setting this here a bit darker, multiply, and now adding the surfaces. That looks a little bit more normal again. And we want to make sure that everything that we are coloring with this is definitely in the lighter area. So I will have the light come from the same direction as the reference, which is the left front. And so you'll have the surfaces hit with light that are at the top usually. We'll just start with the ones that are the brightest. Because the brightest surfaces are the ones at the top, it indicates that the light source is higher up and not really from the side. And don't worry about getting it perfect, as in, you know, following your sketch exactly or whatever. It's just the sketch is there for your reference, how to have, what shape to have where. But we will be refining this anyways. Alright, I'm going to add a slightly darker color next, a bit more saturated, and also a little bit more into the direction of the yellow hue. That looks nice, so I'll go into the clipping mask layer again and add this to the sides that are also lit, but not as strongly as the other sides. In fact, this here would probably be one of those because the top is obscured from vision. And then we can add that to, like, you know, the transitioning shade to rounder rocks, like this one is a round rock. And some here. I don't know what I did here. I'll just add a shading side. We've got the side here and here. Here, here, and let's have some here as well. This here is not quite in the direct light, this rock, not maybe as strong as this side. So that's something to think about when we think about colors as we go through every bit of this painting. Grab the lighter color again for little surfaces that you might have missed a little bit, and in particular surfaces that you think might not fully be hit by this color, just add a little bit like I have here, and not fully. Surface level here I forgot, and a little bit here, but I won't color the whole one. And then this here is also brighter. I'll just grab this one from here like that. And then the tiles, to be honest, they will probably be in this sort of light as well. They will have brighter highlights in some areas, but I won't worry about that right now. We're just adding the basic colors next. So I'll grab a slightly darker, more into the red hue and saturated color. This will be for the sides that I'll actually go a little bit darker, I think. No, I think I'll stick with that. But go even more red and more desaturated, maybe. Okay, let's just go with this one. And add that to the sides that will be surrounded by warm reflections, but not quite in the light. Alright, and This here could be slightly lighter than that, really. Alright, so let's just add some more green shadowy areas. How would that look? Let's see. I might actually leave it like that for a second and just go in with the hard shading brush as an alternative. I would recommend any airbrush like the hard airbrush, and because this is slightly darker, I'm going to make it quite desaturated but keep it a little bit green because we'll have quite a lot of moss growing in places. I'm just going to add some darker shadow boundaries, just shading these rocks a little bit. The sides where there's less warm light, for example, and in between the cracks, for example, between the rocks. I'm going very gently when I brush this in because that will allow the red to come through a little bit as well. And here as well. Here. Then I'll go even darker and more desaturated. I'll create a new clipping mask layer below the rocks, and here I want to add some of the really dark areas because I'm painting from quite an awkward angle to be able to record at the same time with my voice. You can't actually see too well what's happening, so I might just increase this visibility around the waterfall, because the waterfall will be, you know, sort of falling over an area which will be cast in shadow. I will have most of the darkness, I think, like here. Sometimes I think when I do this, I notice areas where I could add a little bit more rock or color or something else. Let's hide that for a second and just see. Alright, I'll hide that. I'll actually hide that fully. And on the same layer with the chalk brush from Procreate. Actually, with the syrup, sorry, I'm going to add another area for rocks here. This is a rock area. This here, I have a little bit of this. Enable it again. I know there was some other rocks here. For the rocks that are in the shade, I would recommend going very desaturated and darker like this. I'll have one here as well, to be honest. And a little peak of rock here. I will have one here. I'll make that a little bit brighter from the top. And add some green shadow because it's below this rock here. And then this one can have a little bit of warmth. Like that. Okay, and then I want to go back into these greens and just add some of these separations in manually. I mean manually. As you'll notice, or you probably have noticed already, multitasking with this isn't the easiest for me. Sorry about that. As long as you can see what I'm doing and I'm halfway explaining it well, I hope that it helps somehow, someone. I'll add a little bit more saturation orange here. The more hues that we add over time, of color, so reds, oranges, yellows, and greens, the more lifelike it will likely be. I will go back to the hard shading brush and grab our green that we added. Here, this rock is sort of leaning down a little bit, so I'm just going to add a little bit of green to the edge here, and if it's too much, just color pick the color that it was and go back over it gently. So there is a little bit of a brushstroke visibility there, but it's not obnoxious or annoying in the way. Here as well, I would probably just go in and just add these different colors together. This one's also leaning towards the ground, so I'll add a little bit of this, more saturated, but I want to make sure that the boundary between the sides is quite clear. Alright, so this is where perhaps the sketch is now getting in the way, where we're sort of trying to carve out the shapes because I can't see what I've added and what I haven't. So let's just disable that one. And go in and keep refining. So when we have a random block of color like this and we know we want to make it a stone, because there's quite a contrast and that's why it looks odd, I would just color pick the shape that you've got there and go a little bit darker and add that around it, so it gets a little bit of a shape to it, a little bit of a 3D shape. I'm using the hard shading brush, which again you can use any airbrush as a replacement for, and I'm just sort of adding that in gently. Here as well, I'd like to have a little bit of a transition. I mean, sometimes harsh shapes are quite nice, but I think we just need to contextualize them a little bit more. Whoops, that is very saturated. Alright, here there is obviously 3 sides. We've got the bottom, this side. This is where the clipping mask is a bit in the way. Let us move through each rock individually so that it makes a little bit more sense. So we've got this color here as the main base, and I'm going to use a slightly darker one just to add an edge to it on the left where it goes down towards the darker area. And then this one I'll color pick the red side, pick a slightly darker color and basically shade that in there as well. Also, it is leaning down, so we'll want to have a slightly darker gradient from the bottom here. And to be honest, we can do that here as well, adding a bit more darker. I went more into towards green, which will make it a bit cooler. Anything here obviously is very warm, and then here it just gets cold, so that's what I mean when I talk about that. Alright, so I'll do a similar thing here, color pick at the sides. Now this here actually should be quite a strong side, but it doesn't help to just... Oh, thank you. Oops. Doesn't help to just redraw some of these lines. This here is a bit of a surface, and then this here obviously is another side that is going into the shadow direction. Here I'd like to have a little rock that sort of peeks out, but because it's sitting towards the back, maybe not quite that dark, it's definitely in a desaturated area of tone and not quite as bright. To make this look a bit sharper, I've just chosen a slightly darker color and I'm basically creating a shape around it. Alright, and then we've got this here. Again, this here will have a slightly darker edge to it because it's sort of falling towards the bottom. And then this edge here will also be getting decreasingly colder, or darker rather, as we go to the right. But yes, I will be adding some green here as well to get that warmth out of it a little bit. What did I add here? Oh, I see, that was the side. So then I'm just going to grab a darker color and draw the line here for the rock. Then we've got here some and here. Let us do that again. Alright, here we've got something here. This edge is falling off from the light, so that's why I'm giving it this color instead of the bright one. And also on the other side, where I'm going a bit more red, transitioning into the red. Shaping this side out like this. Here, I'll make sure this has a bit of an edge here and here. And now gently again with the same color, I'm just going to add this gradient from the bottom, and the same for this one, adding this sort of gradient up. In here there is this really dark bit I'm just going to add. I've got some green coming over here, and I know I wanted to have a surface area, so I'm just going to add this surface, and I'll have green in there, so it doesn't matter if it looks like there's something missing right now or whatever. We'll figure it out as we go. I'll add the green next so we know how much texture to add to each rock. Just going to finish up this area. I want to make sure that this back here is dark, like so. And then we can have a little bit of an edge down here that is in this brighter green color. I think that would look quite nice. Making sure that it's obvious this is part of the rock. And then down here obviously we've got one more, giving it some of this, and then also painting the side one, and the other side is falling down, so it doesn't matter. And then we'll also give this side a bit of a red tint here, and then because it's on the ground I'll give it a little bit of a green tint from the bottom. That's quite strong, so I'll just go in over with this one. On the ground, because we've got stone tiles, I'll go more into the warm area and grab a darker color. I'll go even more red, actually maybe a bit more like this, slightly lighter like this. Turn on our sketch again just to get a bit of an idea of where we could add these tiles, and with this color then I'm just going to add this sort of outline. You know, it doesn't quite have to fit the sketch, as mine doesn't, or it could if you really thought through this, or if you put extra care into it. Alright, just a bit like that. And then I'll color pick the brighter color and just make sure that every area looks like it's definitely, you know, a tile like this. And I'll definitely get a little bit darker over here already because it's definitely in the shade, but we'll add the shadow later on properly. Here there is one more rock. I'd like to have a little bit more bright like that. And the same down here is obviously some stuff I haven't really carved out yet as I'm moving around the whole thing a bit slowly. I'm just adding in the shadow as I see it on the sketch that I added. I'm just gonna add these darker edges to where the waterfall goes down. Alright. Well, I think that'll do for this part. Let's just disable this one again. Haha, And just maybe redraw some of these edges if they are really bad, like mine was just there. Here, a couple of holes here and there won't break the bank, especially because it's quite nice to have that sort of strange intermittent texture in some areas. If you see a rock that could use a little bit more light, go for it. Like that. Maybe even down here, very saturated in the corner, because it's reflecting the light from this rock. Alright, anyways, let's add some green. 30 minutes into this. I will use the chalk brush for that first, and let's go ahead and grab a nice jungle green. Testing it. Okay, so it's quite a medium green. I like that. I'm just gonna add this here for reference. And maybe go even slightly brighter and saturated as I add it in so I can actually see it. You're very welcome to do the same. This is sort of a guide. I don't want to cover too much of the rocks because I quite like the shape of them. But you can add as much or as little as you want. The chalk brush has got a great texture for this. I like to use it for generally for green stuff. This here is sort of climbing over the rock. There are probably a lot of cracks in this one, like in the reference, so it'll have places to hold on to. And this here is not a clipping mask because otherwise I wouldn't be able to draw over the shape, and it's quite nice to add a bit more silhouette to the whole thing. The waterfall is coming from a very green and lush place. Obviously all this green is now in one color, but probably would be lighter up there when we go through it all. I'll add some moss growing on this rock up here a little bit. Slanted, growing down the rock, across here, maybe a little bit over here in between these cracks and over the bottom of this rock into the crevice here. And then down here, obviously this cave is perfect for things to sprout in, and following the direction of the waterfall. If you can't see it somewhere properly, just go a bit darker or lighter. You know, you don't have to stick to one color, you know, forcibly. And then down here, I sort of don't have a rock where the waterfall is actually sliding down. I didn't actually do it as the reference. So, just to say, in case you are trying to do that. Oops, go lighter to see it here. A little bit growing over here. Like that. And maybe even sort of just coming up here behind this rock. Very quickly this will come to life now as we add several colors to contextualize the green, darker and lighter colors and all that. That will really quickly come to life, which is something I really love. And then back here, I'd like to have some green peek through to just signify that there is something else in there. Okay, I've moved up and down in this one hue, so it's all sort of flat because of that. But now I'm going to start adding darker colors to some of these areas just to really shape out the green I've just added. You can stay on the same layer or create a new one if you want to be extra careful, but sometimes it's quite nice to just sort of trust the process and, you know, sort of go with it, figure it out. I'm just going to add, like darker edges to where the green is coming out of somewhere or attached to a place. A little bit of shadow to this brighter color. Not so much in here because I've already got enough contrast there, it's quite visible, so that's okay. But down here I'd like to add a little bit more, and also I'm just going to add like something like this, a couple of vines growing over and out, and some grass over here, of course, some greens coming out from here like that. Alright, so we've moved around in this one color green. What I'd like to do now is really go and reinforce those shadows, so I'll pick a medium green because we've been moving in the warmer area of color. So I won't go too blue, but I will go into a colder green. And here I'm just going to try and choose one that's sort of not too saturated, although that could be quite pretty, but just dark and sort of in the middle. Test. And then just try and really add that shape. So when we're thinking of grass, it would be something like, this is the dark color I'm using, this has been the color we've been moving around in. Just now to add it, we've added some even brighter in this color, and generally speaking we're moving sort of in this direction of greens, although that wasn't very pretty. Like that. But yeah, so we're choosing that darker color now to just get into these cracks and shape out really where all that shadow will be. Where there are more flat surfaces where the green is on, I won't bother with this dark one too much, like here, like just something like this, a small vine indicating the green, darker green vine underneath. But it's more important in areas like here where there is a proper separation between these rocks. And the green is coming out of somewhere, so we need to sort of add that where it's coming from, the source, to make it a little bit more realistic and contextualize it into this painting. Of course, when it goes around the corner, that's something different. And here, just adding some to the edges of the green, like this, especially in this darker area. Since the background here isn't actually black, it wouldn't be too much of a difference, so that's fine. Here I want to add some nice separation, distinction, like that. And perhaps here, where you have any harsh lines, you could easily cover that with this dark green, for example. Adding some distinctive lines. Already I feel like it's looking a lot more 3D than 2D. And then over here as well, this here will be mostly dark green. Climbing over in this shadowy area, a bit like, you can see that distinction in the reference photo as well, image. And then at the back here with this grass bundle, as it's sort of in the shade. And we're already a step closer for these rocks as well. I want to go on a new layer below this green now, and I would like to add a couple of cracks in the rocks so that we can work around that with the green stuff, which would be nice. So with an HB pencil, yeah, why not? We can just color pick the main color and choose something that is fairly dark, a bit more saturated, definitely on the new layer for me anyways, because I'm not sure how that will look. I'm not sure if I should go into a more square shape with this, following the reference, or not. Yeah, I'm just going to wing it and see. And this color is now for the front. It's not so dark that it would be very visible on the back. And by the way, you don't have to add any cracks if you don't want to, but I will choose a darker color for the other side. I'll try and not repeat my patterns too much, but usually I just add a bit of a line, maybe a twig, maybe another line, coming from the top or the bottom, really up to you. This here is a round one, so it's maybe a bit more round, like that, crawling up. And then here it's again sort of flat, moving down, maybe along the edge because it broke off somewhere. Even adding here these little edges, showing that there might be some splinters missing or something here. And you can fill in even edges that looked funny. A bit of shape with this color too. Here, where there are obvious changes in surface, that's quite nice. Following sort of the direction of the surface itself. Downwards, sideways, diagonally. Slanted or straight. I'll create a little bit of a bigger hole here. Even just like this, merging up. Highlighting that there are different sides. I will take away this bit actually and just make that go up like that. And then I'll choose a darker color and redder for the other side, or actually maybe even a bit more yellow. Because this is darker again, you can also just add some edging to the actual rocks. Shade in some areas that are darker like this one, or even below here. Really adding some extra shading, some hatching if you want, like this here. That's a little bit too round for me here. Alright, and that is pretty much the, I think they've got some below here as well, so I will use this darker color that we just had and continue with the HB pencil. I'm not going to cover the whole thing here, but basically add a line at the edge, like at the top edge, and that basically hopefully will create a bit more of a depth perception with the tiles, because we're basically showing that although yes there are crevices here, they are not one-dimensional or two-dimensional. They are sort of more 3D. Here I'm just going to color pick this red and fix this area. Same here. Grabbing the color from the back here, and I'm just going to add a little bit more tile here just to make sure that this is all done. This area. Shading upwards into the rock or downwards to create that, bit of transition. Like that. Sort of just fixing areas, really. Little by little. Okay, nice. I think it's time to add our waterfall actually. So with the syrup brush, or rather, yeah, I would recommend going with the syrup brush, but I think I will be going with my defined coloring brush. I'm more used to the wielding that one really. And basically we're going to create a lighter bit at the top, like this. I'm going with a warmer color for my water because of the light. We're going to have some at the top here, going to have a proper splash down here and run through here where it falls back down. Adding the sides. Sort of sketching the outline of the waterfall in here, taking away if you sort of create a shape you don't like so much. And well, I don't have the splash there, but I'm going to make sure this runs across these stones like that. Next, I want to choose the darker green we had earlier and choose the darker version, so slightly more blue and definitely darker, and just add that sort of intermittently around the water. That'll be a big point of reflection, and the same with this lighter color of the stone, like this. The water is coming from somewhere, so I'm just going to create a bit of an edge, and I'll do that in the color of the stone that was lighter, like that. Alright, once we have that sort of, and I'm just going to create a little bit of a shadow here to the water and add some of that green as well. Maybe the lighter green this time because we are moving more on a flat surface, and some of this darker background color. And then, this is pretty decent. You can leave it at that and smudge it out, but let's go ahead and smudge it out. So I will stick with the same defined coloring brush, and I'd recommend the syrup because of the similar shape. And just start smudging. Actually, does it smudge the same? Very similar. Slightly less, so maybe even use an airbrush for this. And just smudge it downward. here I'm going to create a little bit of a darker boundary because I added a bunch of the darker green. I can pull that back and forward basically in the smudge option. This will be a bit hidden with grass in a minute. And then obviously it comes down and it's less bright here. That will have some nice not sparkles, but you know, my goodness, it's hard to concentrate at the same time. And then here, pulling this one down. Making sure there's a bit of a darker edge to it as well. If you are worried about this part, I should have said this before, but do duplicate your layer and then you've got a safe option. You can still do that now if you go back all the way, but you could just try again too. It's not the end of the world. You got this. And then here, I actually want to have quite a strong stop, really, before the water flows down like that. It is what it is. And then pulling it down. I also want to make sure the water looks a bit more like it's flowing down diagonally to the right, because the light is coming from the left top. All right. I'm basically pulling in from the left and the right, and then smudging out again to get that brighter color more into the middle. And then down here we've got the area where the water comes down, perhaps joining another bit of river and flowing outwards. This is sort of just really trying it out, seeing what sticks. I'm just going to erase bits here to make it look a bit more orderly. And really the same for this shape. I'm just going to add this so the clipping mask is extended a little bit. Then going back into the waterfall layer, I'm just, going to take this here away, this edge. And then the green as well. I mean, it's nice when it grows over, but I'd like to keep it a little bit more organized, like this. Alright, now that we've added our water, we can add more texture and details. I'm just going to stop everything and see if it's still working. Oh my goodness. Alright, so we've done the shade, we've done the waterfall, so I would like to add... I'd like to add some proper shading, color, and stuff like that. So for that, I will add a new layer underneath the green and underneath the waterfall. And I will set this to the overlay blending mode layer. Then grabbing the hard shading brush in my case and any other airbrush, the hard airbrush would be great in your case if you like. We'll just be grabbing a darker desaturated orange and just see what happens when we start adding a bit of shading. So down here, this is quite in the dark, and so I'm just going to add some down here and to the edge here. Over here, this overlay layer will also increase the saturation really, so you know, just go steady. If I went strong, it would go very dark, and I just want to add some gradients and a bit of darkness, so we'll just go a little bit darker, see what that does. Maybe even go more red, It's not only based on the color that you're using, but also on the color that your subject is. I'll add shadow in between the crevices again and in the areas where the rocks will be darker, like here. Generally in the background here. And just see how it goes. If it's too strong, you can always change that. It's always on a separate layer like this. And experimentation is the way. Adding it on the sides here. Having a good base though, that's why we did all this, rendering thus far is always really important. Gives you just a very different understanding of how the light is falling and structure to it and all that. Because we're adding this with an airbrush type brush, well, it would be quite blurry if there wasn't any actual sharp rendering beneath. Here we're adding a little bit of shadow that comes down like this and over here. And for fun, I'm just going to add a little bit here next to the waterfall bottom and also here. Then on the side of this rock, that's quite strong. Not that strong. At the bottom of these rocks that are falling towards the ground or leaning. And then I'll switch into a more green blue and just below the green areas, if there's any area you think it looks a little bit funny, you can add some shading here. Edges of stones, and also here following some of these splinters in the rock, carving out the shape. Here, because there's this rock leaning over, I'm going to add a bit of shading to the top to that stone. Here as well. On the side here, maybe hide this rock behind a little bit more shadow. Even on the surface here, the light may not be equal. Oops, that was really strong. Well, I feel like that's looking a little bit better already. Alright, and then that is sort of some shading, some extra color. I'd like to add some extra color in yellow and bright. The more you go over here, the more saturated it will be. So I'll choose a fairly light yellow. And I'll create another overlay layer on top where I'll add this, because I also want it to be added to maybe the waterfall and stuff. We'll see. That is actually slightly too desaturated. I do want to have a bit more color and maybe a little bit more orange. See what works. Yeah, I think that's a bit better. I'll have a bit more warmth on the surfaces of the rocks where they catch the light, / on the edges. And because we've got some strong reds and some, very yellow things, now I'm going into the orange tone a bit more and just see how it looks when I add that as well. Maybe even to the sides as I'm doing here. where there may be a bit of reflection, that is strong, warm light reflections. Still very yellow, so I switched to a bit more of a reddish tone. I quite like getting all the colors involved, really, when it comes to rocks and stuff like that anyways, because I'd like them to be really nice and warm. Adding some reflections around these cracks here, where they might be reflecting the ground. And here on the side. Maybe on the top up here. There are some things that are really sticking out right now for me that I find too much. There are these really dark cracks, for example, and some really, edges that aren't that well blended out. Wherever these various things may be on whatever layer, the great thing is, because we haven't put any great detail into it yet, we can cover that if we want, basically, or we could go back through all the layers, but I won't do that, I don't think. You can always hide and unhide your layer and just see if you like what you just did, basically. Here there's an edge that I find too dark. For example, in the lower overlay layer, I'm just going to take that really dark edge off here because it's not nice. And similarly in the green, this is something I know I know where it is on the layers. I don't like this dark crack. Go into the smudge option and just smudge out something like that. Still doesn't make too much sense. I'll go back into the upper overlay layer, and still with the hard shading brush / your airbrush, I'm just going to add a bit of warmth on this little reflection down here. And here, signifying that the light is sort of coming over like this. Oops, wow, that is dark, intense. Maybe a bit too much. Maybe even in the waterfall a little bit, because the water does reflect its surroundings very well. Here we go. All right. I don't really like what's happening with this rock, but we will fix it now. Alright, let's go ahead and create a new layer over this. So, yeah, basically, this is the top layer besides our sketch layer that I have hidden. And I'm going in with I'll go in with my texture brush of my set, and as an alternative, I would suggest you guys use the old brush that you'll find under painting, or you can use the turpentine brush. Color picking the green and going lighter and warmer is a good way forward, just to get some initial texture in. I'm only adding this because it's quite bright in areas where I think the light will hit more, on the ridges here or over here in the areas. Great way to add the leaf texture without dabbling down 1,000 little dots, although you know me, that is what I do. Working it a little bit smarter. Not everywhere, because you'll run into the risk that you are creating such a repetitive pattern that the natural aspect of it is lost. Sometimes it makes sense to just add a bit of darkness. Here I'm just going to add some darker leaves with the texture brush. Here I'd like to add, oh no, that might be my battery of the pencil, great. There's always something. I think we are doing details, which is nice for the green, so let's choose a different brush. How about the Inca brush? That's quite a nice one. grab one of those medium colors that you got in those bushes around and add some leaf detail basically. I'll grab a darker color next up here and just add a little bit more shadow, make it look a little bit more three-dimensional, like a bit more shadow in between. And also here, where I'd like to have like this sort of moss come over, I also want to add a lighter green on top. A bit more yellow really, like that. And then I'll go back and choose a slightly darker color, maybe even darker, like this. Make sure to intersperse it with some brighter greens. That's not all lines. Going back to a darker green, adding some of that in here. Like that. Over here as well. Getting it into the back there, choosing that lighter green that's in the middle here. And I'll add some over here as well. And I'll add brighter greens here as they sort of overhang the waterfall stream. Generally speaking, towards the light, obviously there is more bright green, warm green. And once again, for me, it's sort of a little bit of trial and error to see what fits. Add a brighter yellow over here. Slightly more green perhaps. See how that looks. Going slightly darker again and just adding a little bit of that on the top here, going to the back, hanging down, growing over the edge, like that. Yellow, green, anywhere you have a nice sort of light catcher around. Over here I'd like to have some more light. I will go slightly more green though than yellow, and then get a really nice saturated darker color in there as well, so it gets some context like this. Darker or cooler green I mean, and then darker again or lighter. Just see what fits in some areas, growing around. Here there isn't a lot of light, but it's probably still lit up from the various reflections of the surfaces, and the same in here where the crevices are and there isn't too much light. I would go with a bit more of a cooler green. Even just a hint of a couple of leaves is quite beautiful. This one I'd probably go a bit more yellow again. And a little bit darker as we near the cave area. Going down, hanging down, growing up. A bit warmer and brighter just here. Warmer and even brighter here. Going a little bit more saturated and slightly darker here, maybe even darker, just to get that really saturated leaf color here into the edge. And again, darker and less warm as we go down the edge here. Brighter on the top. Alright, and then some more brighter leaves here, warmer, darker and warm. Maybe even some more moss climbing over the edge of this beautiful rock. And then obviously on the ground, I'll keep these fairly warm, adding some leaf shapes in dark, and then I'll add some in lighter, building up on this shape. Where there is water, there is probably life, so the fact that these are growing over the hot rocks is due to that water coming down. That's the story I'll sort of go with. Going back into slightly colder areas here and making sure we're properly getting some shadows in here as well. Building up. Colder shadows. I'll switch back to my texture brush for a second, again using the old brush if you don't have access to that one. Like that. Switching back to the Inco brush and just building up from that shape that we've added with the texture brush. Then I'd like to add some warmer, brighter highlights here. And even darker just to get some proper shadow here. Maybe a bit of a vine unfurling over here. And this one, because it's quite in front of a bright area, I'm going to add warmer and brighter greens here, with some of them properly catching the light. And then up here, adding some darker first, building up on that vine shape that we added last time. I want to get some of that rock color coming through here, to be honest. It's a bit thick for me, this vine shape. And then with a warm and bright color, I'm going to add some lighter greens that sort of stick over the edge of the top and on the side, with some of them being really bright. And again, where it seems like it's too bright, adding a transitioning color that's darker in the same hue. Making it warm. And then back up here, because we've sort of found a little bit of a routine with I feel like I've sort of got the hang of which colors I'm using where. I'm just going to add some of this brighter yellow up at the top as well, making sure to add some medium yellow in there too. And some of this. Okay, time for some rock texture. So I want to go below all of these extra greens, above the overlay layer, and with the stucco brush from Procreate, I'd like to go ahead and color pick the surface I'm working on, lower the opacity of the brush a little bit, and then go in and add a slightly darker one. Because your surfaces should be nice and uneven in terms of color, it won't be visible all the way through, which is, in my opinion, quite pretty. You can see I'm drawing over the edge of this shape now, but that's easily rectifiable. I'll just make a clipping layer mask out of these layers in a moment. And on top as well, going slightly more saturated and darker, like that. Oops, that's too much. Maybe choosing these lighter colors from the other edge and allowing it to sort of reflect off the other edges as well. Like that. Here I'm just going to use this and just basically paint over this really dark edge that I didn't like. And because it's more round, there aren't such intense edges, so I'll just make sure these go a little bit into each other. Like so, and suddenly we've got two rocks here. Oh well. Anyways, I'm using the same dark red on this and the light grey reflecting off this surface here and this rock, and then we'll have the darker bit here casting a shadow on this rock, like so. Adding some to the edges, not necessarily covering the whole surface. Maybe I should have said that earlier. The great thing is we're also going over the cracks, so they look less deep, less stand out, and just sort of become part of the rock, really. Alright, well, that is pretty good. Grab some of this over here. Grab some of this, whoops, over here. I would like to be more active here on YouTube as well. I am posting a lot of tutorials every week on Patreon, so it'd be great if you guys could check out that site and see if that would be something you'd like to support. At the minute I'm juggling a lot of commissions and stuff, so YouTube tutorials are taking a little bit of a step back at the minute, but hopefully I'll be able to do this very, very regularly in the future. Reading your guys' comments makes all the difference. I can't even tell you how shocked I am sometimes at how supportive you guys are. I don't know, I've heard different things about different platforms as a creator, of course, and I've seen some obviously really toxic sides to any platform, but I mean, YouTube has just been incredible. You guys have been amazing, so kind. Oh, by the way, I'm doing the same down here. I'm sorry, now I'm rambling. Here, just adding a little bit of texture without any crazy color changes, sticking with this darker red, maybe adding a bit more dark over here and here where there is less light, and on this rock, and maybe, oops, over here too, like that. I hope you're enjoying this tutorial so far. Okay, so I think we'll just add a little bit of that really dark, it's a near black, maybe even black color to this ground, just on the edges where there is more shadow. I will set all of these, well, I will try and set all of these to I don't know if that's possible, to be honest, if we can make these clipping masks, because otherwise the green will be clipping mask. Yeah, sorry guys, I will have to manually erase these edges, as you will likely have to as well. Luckily it's not too bad. Okay, now the obvious thing is the light is missing, so let's go on top and create a new layer and set it to add. Here I will choose the hard shading brush again and figuring out what light to use. I usually go with warmer lighting. Like that would work for me, I think. Sort of an orange. And what I want to do is I really want to just highlight the edges where there will be light. Obviously, as you can see, it gets really strong really fast. So just go steady. I'm going to add a little bit of highlight to some edges where there are reflections. Here there's obviously a surface. Whoops. And then here we'll have a little bit of reflection of the green. The water will be foaming, so it'll cause a bit of mist to arise. This surface area would be quite bright where the water is flowing and there are like water sparks flying through the air. We'll have some light here, some light here. Trying not to cover the edges with this brush because I don't want it to have that sort of, you know, airbrushed look really. So just, you know, obviously I'm also covering the edges to a degree, but what I'm going to do with that is I'll grab my define coloring brush. Again, the syrup is the alternative, and then just sort of pushing the light away from the edge in some cases. So it creates more of a sharp boundary where the light is caught. Pulling it, pushing it to whatever direction you want really. I'll make sure that the edges have the most light and it doesn't really overlap. Like that. I think the ad layer is probably one of the reasons why a lot of people don't think digital art is real art, and they see it more as something that you can use to cheat with, as in it's not your own, you know, technique. You're relying on the blending mode function. But I think anyone who's ever tried to paint digitally knows it's not as easy as it looks, and just because you can use these layers doesn't mean that it will turn out well. I think the over blending certainly is one of those major things that I think most people struggle with. I think I struggle with that a lot. Alright, this is sort of more the edge shading. I would suggest using a texture brush to add some extra rock texture, like the burnt tree for example, but I can't guarantee how that will look, so that's why I'm going to create another layer that is an add layer. Actually, let's just make it a normal layer, and then we have a bit more control, grabbing that really bright edge that we've just added and adding that sort of texture to it. Again, trying not to go over the edges as I just did. I will go back and erase it in a moment. Adding this here to the edges will just give it some extra texture that is interesting to look at, but also is going to take it from this sort of very brushed out look maybe a little bit darker to a more natural look. I will set this brush to a low opacity and just see. Might be a bit easier to control, but no, actually not. Not too much of a fan of this right now, to be honest, of the brush. Not winning me over. And then here, grabbing the lighter color and just adding some texture in that color to the stones that have some red in them in the shadowy areas. I'll try the same with the dark one. That's very intense. I'll just add a little bit of the other color over. Yeah, it's better than it was anyways. Adding some of that orange here. And here, and then this one. To be honest, I think we could add some of that stucco again and just go a bit darker on this one. Create a bit more color variety in here. Alright, and now I'll create another add layer. And again, grab the hard shading brush or an airbrush. I want to add some wider reaching light. And because that looks better with a darker background, I will set this to a more gray. This will change how the camera perceives it for you guys. I don't know if this is still the same, but yeah. I've set it to some gray, and now when we add this on the new add layer, I've set the brush opacity lower as well so I don't make a rash decision. And then I'll just add some diffused light based off the surfaces that the light falls onto most. Adding a little patch here, bit of diffused light here, like that. And then I want to add some here, but without relying on the actual like light like this. I want to go in and smudge it out again. That's very bright up there. This here, that's nice. So just having a nice little over, catching the light in different areas. And becoming a very bright stream. To be honest, I don't know if I want to smudge that out. I quite like the look of that. And while we're at it, because the background is quite visible now, everything here, if you don't want it to, if you want to make a whole painting out of it or whatever, then I would just advise cleaning up the edges a little bit. It's a bit of a, cat and mouse thing, this one, because I don't remember what I put exactly on which layer. Here we go. I will take that green spot out there for a minute as well and take care of the colors in a bit. And then we've got another, add layer. That's not overhanging. Oh yeah, it is. Here. Alright. Now I want to add a couple more, wow, what a difference. A couple more things. I'll create a new layer that is a normal layer, and with the Inca brush, based on the intense light that we have here, I quite like it. I will add my highlights. It's like real highlights, that stand out against all of this stuff now. Not necessarily in white like I am, I just put that up there, but maybe, or even not highlights and just trying to get the transition between these various shades back, like this one. I think this is really thick, this vine. I don't like it so much, so I'm just going to add a little bit of the stone color in between, like that, and even add that alongside some of these edges, like that. And I'm just going to tidy up this texture here for this rock. I'm using the Inca brush, so that's why it has some nice texture in it, and it's also quite a sharp brush. There is not too much softness around it, which can really help with refining, these areas. Just making sure that all of these are nice and sharp edges, and sharp edges along the various cuts of the rock. Highlighted, sides. Maybe you can add even some extra ripples in the rock, like I am here. Ripples, you know what I mean. Not cuts either. As long as you know what I mean. This looks sort of weird. Let's go with this. How much you do at this point is really up to you. I think the more you refine it, the nicer it will be, really. But of course, there's always the thing of overdoing it also, so perhaps a mixed basket. Also here the green is quite thick, perhaps too much. So I'm just grabbing those colors of the rock and adding them, sort of back into the whole mix. The nice thing is it adds this wonderful illusion of detail as well, all these scribbles. So less work for us. But don't get me wrong, I do love all of this, so even though I'm saying less work, actually, I don't know if it is. That is a bit too bright down there, and I feel like this here is a little bit too dark. And then I'm going to add this outline a little bit, and here, and also with the stucco brush here. Here I can add another couple of light greens, add some highlights. Some more darker greens. Here, I would like to just make sure that this doesn't look quite as naked over here, and just add some greens. Darker, lighter, and then figuring out which sort of hues work best. Because this is quite a warm area, really. I think warm is better in this case. adding some shading to the rock down here. Oops. And here, this rock looks a little bit weird. And then down to this ground. Obviously they are tiles, but at the same time, you know, they will have a bit more of a grainy structure, won't they? So I'm adding some slightly darker colors to the edge and then really giving it a nice bright highlight along where the light catches the most, and then sort of shading in the rest like that. And sort of alternating between dots and, you know, shading strokes. As we go into the darker areas, I'll match the highlights to the level of darkness a bit more, and perhaps desaturation, so more grey in the areas where there's less bright light. I will just go ahead and add some really nice warm highlights here, just in the form of squiggles across the edge of this rock. And here too, because it's sort of facing upward this side here a bit more, slightly darker perhaps as I go down, still with the Inca brush as well, just giving it more texture. If you feel like something is too flat, just, you know, grab a nice brush with a little bit of texture, even an HB pencil or whatever, anything with a bit of texture, and then just grab the colors, choose similar colors, slightly different, warmer, colder, brighter. Don't think you can go too far wrong with just adding and seeing where it leads you. And if you don't like it, you can just try again. Alright, I think that's pretty alright. I think I'm happy with that. And as usual, I would go into the add layer below that and just add some fairy lights, sparkles around the water. And oh yeah, we need to add some texture to the water really. With the light pen, I'm already sort of adding a couple of water streaks down here. But yeah, obviously we want to add a little bit of texture, so I would recommend using the stucco brush in that bright color and going over it with this like that. A little bit at the top, a little bit at the bottom, in the middle. And then also I would go back into the normal layer. I'll grab the really dark color in the back there, and with the stucco brush again, add some darker wherever you are, wherever it works. So like in the top and the bottom section, or in the middle section, wherever the light sort of cuts off really. And if it's too strong, I recommend going back in with the stucco brush in eraser and just taking the edge off a little bit like that. And because we're on a normal layer, we can go in with another brush. I'll choose the chalk brush this time, using like a medium bright color that we have in the water here. I basically go in and refine the shape, making sure it's nice and wide, or, you know, thinner in some areas with a darker color. Not all areas will have the same amount of brightness, darkness, or texture. And here's a good example of me doing something I didn't like the shape down here. So basically I've covered it with a cross hatch just like this. And I will go over with the color of the water and still with the chalk brush. I'll grab the hard shading brush because I feel like it's too bright down here. That's quite intense. I've lowered the opacity of the brush and I'm just going in with a larger size that gives me a bit more control. And then I'm going to add darkness down here. I know that's quite intense. I'll create a new layer now, and with the stucco brush go back in. Like that. And that will be fine, to be honest, for me. Back to the other layer with where we just added all these lines. Just going to rectify that as well and add a little bit of darkness up here. Not quite as much, but definitely where it hits the ground, a little bit like that. And then on top I'll go back in with a stucco brush and a more desaturated bright color, adding some of this, and where it's too much, taking away a bit with the same brush. And then I guess one more thing would be lovely is a bit of fog or mist. I'll choose more blue fog for the areas where there isn't so much light from the sun directly, just adding it with the hard shading brush, and also just try out how it would look. This is obviously quite strong. And I think it's a bit too strong, so I'm just going to go in with the hard shading brush in the eraser or your airbrush as the alternative, taking some of that away. But not all of it. But mainly there where the light doesn't hit it. So like here on the stones, I don't really want to have that. And the same here, where the light really comes into play. And instead, let's grab something that will give us some splashes. Maybe more in the spray paint section. With the flicks, I'd recommend using another new layer for that, really. And I'll go back into the brighter one because, whoops, that is quite, oh my goodness. I don't usually use this one, as is quite obvious, I think. And I'm just adding some flicks into this painting as well. There are always a couple of areas where I think, okay, I should have added more something there. Like here, this is so bright, I want to add some you know, whoops, darker shading or texture with the stucco brush here, for example. But yeah, so basically I've added some splatters, and then I would create another add layer, and here add the final light to the splashes. Fairly bright. This will be very low saturation versus this here on the add layer would be quite high. I'll go with the low saturated one and just add in a couple of small sort of foggy brush strokes like that. The good news is it's on a new layer, so if you don't like it, you can take it away. I'm quite happy with that. And I'd like to add some more bright, what's it called? Texture. Intermittently. I know I can go easily into over brightness, like I could add probably forever. I wouldn't recommend it. But just a little bit extra on the waterfalls, on the rocks. If you have some rocks in here that are not sticking out anymore, give them a bit of a surface highlight so they're still semi-visible. Even here where it feels like I didn't put anything in earlier. And here, just these sort of areas, you know. Again, I would go back and start adding some more bright, because we're on an add layer still, adding bright leaves here is really easy. Just choose whatever saturation and brightness you want and just adding some really bright leaves. Overall, especially where the light obviously hits the water's edge and stuff where there's lots of green around, that could be quite magical. And that concludes the tutorial. I hope you had fun and enjoyed this, and if you want shorter tutorials, this might not be the channel for you. I haven't ever succeeded in shorter tutorials, I don't think, that were good, so yeah, I'm sorry. But I've heard from a lot of you that you do enjoy the long ones, which I'm really happy about. And yeah, if you want to also submit your own vote on what I do as a tutorial next, then just come by my Instagram. I intermittently, or at the minute infrequently, but I will want to do more, so I will be uploading votes in my story, and you can come over and just choose your favorite for the next tutorial. Plus I also share some tutorials I add on Patreon and stuff, what I'm doing at the minute, so that's probably the best way to stay up to date with what I put out there in terms of these resources. And anyways, let me know if you have any questions at all, and have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching.